שוטר, אם כי אפשר, יש עוד מקומות פנויים פה. אני קודם כל רוצה להודות לדוקטור שמעון אוחיון שעומד לצאת והוא עכשיו לא יוצא, על הנכונות של מרכז דהן שהוא עומד בראשו לקיים את הכנס כאן בבר אילן. אנחנו ניסינו לעשות את זה באוניברסיטת תל אביב, אבל קיבלנו כתף קרה ושמחנו מאוד שדוקטור אוחיון קיבל אותנו בזרועות פתוחות כפי שעשה את זה גם בעבר. ואני שמח שהכנס מתקיים כאן. אני רוצה גם להודות לשני העוזרות שלו, לאורה ולאיילת, שעבדנו אותם קשה מאוד בעניין הזה, ואני רואה שהארגון מוצלח מאוד, וזה הודות באמת לכישורים שלהם ולרצון הטוב שלהם לקיים את הכנס כאן בצורה מאורגנת. המושב שלנו הוא קצת בעייתי מבחינת השפות, כי יש בעיה עם הזום לשפה האנגלית, שאחת המשתתפות שלנו צריכה לדעת מה קורה פה. ולכן אני נותנת אפשרות לג'קי קומפורטי לדבר באנגלית. רומן אברמוב כמובן שידבר באנגלית ולא בבולגרית.
אני גם מדבר באנגלית.
בבקשה?
אני גם מדבר באנגלית.
מה אתה? יופי. אז גם עגול ידבר באנגלית. מצוין.
נאדז'ה צריכה להבין אותנו.
טוב, המושב הזה הוא מוקדש לזכרו של אדם שרבים לא מכירים אותו. אני במקרה אישית מכיר אותו, כי הוא גם היה רופא הילדים שלי כשהייתי ילד בירושלים. ושמו עמנואל אמקו מרגוליס. המושב הזה מוקדש לזכרו של אמקו מרגוליס, שבצעירותו בלט בקרב הנהגת התנועה הציונית בבולגריה, כאחד מראשי מפלגת פועלי ציון. פועלי ציון זה בעצם מפא"י בבולגריה, המפלגה הציונית הגדולה ביותר בבולגריה, ומטעמה יצא בדצמבר 1946 כחבר במשלחת הציונית לקונגרס הכ"ב הציוני בבאזל. כמי ששלט בשפה העברית והאנגלית כבר מנעוריו, היה בשנים 1945-1947 כתב של עיתון דבר בישראל, מטעם בולגריה, ובו זמנית כתב של סוכנות הידיעות היהודית בניו יורק. בדצמבר 1944, כשבן גוריון ביקר במשך שבוע בבולגריה, אמקו הצעיר ליווה את בן גוריון ותרגם אותו מעברית לבולגרית ומבולגרית לעברית, והיה לעזר רב, בן גוריון בזיכרונותיו באמת מזכיר לטובה את אמקו. בסוף שנת 1947 הוא הפסיק את לימודי הרפואה שלו בסופיה והחליט לעלות לארץ בעלייה בלתי לגלית. הספינה שלו נתפסה בדרכה לארץ והוא נשלח עם כל אנשי עולי הספינה לקפריסין, והיה למעלה משנה בקפריסין, ורק בתחילת 1949 הוא עלה לישראל. בקפריסין הוא היה אחד ממנהיגי המחנה וגם לימד עברית בגלל הידיעה הטובה שלו בעברית. הוא סיים כאן במחזור הבולגרי, שנקרא במרכאות, את הקורס הראשון לרפואה, שרבים ממנו, 2/3 כמעט, היו סטודנטים מבולגריה, שוויקטור שם טוב ארגן את זיכרונו לברכה את הקורס הזה, והתמחה ועבד בבית חולים הדסה. כפי שאמרתי לכם, הוא גם היה רופא הילדים שלי ואני זוכר אותו מאוד לטובה. שנים מאוחר יותר הוא התקבל למשרת הוראה בכירה בבית הספר לרפואה בניו יורק. הוא קיבל את ההזמנה והוא חי בניו יורק, נפטר שם ב-2007, אבל נקבר בירושלים. אלה הדברים לגבי אמקו מרגוליס. ברשותכם אני אציג את המרצים ואחר כך נציג גם את הנושא. פרופסור רומן אברמוב הוא כלכלן והיסטוריון, העוסק במשך שנים רבות במחקרים מקרו ומיקרו-כלכליים מזוויות היסטוריות שונות. בעשור האחרון עבד על מחקר העוסק במחלוקות האתניות על רקע כלכלי בבולגריה, בין המיעוט היהודי, היווני והרוב הבולגרי, מהתקופה הפוסט-עות'מאנית עד מלחמת העולם השנייה. ספרו הצלה והשפלה, הצלה אגב במרכאות, המדיניות הכלכלית האנטישמית בבולגריה בשנים 1944, עורר סערה ציבורית ומחלוקת פוליטית חריפה בבולגריה. ספר נוסף, שעורר ביקורת נוקבת בבולגריה, עוסק בגירוש יהודי טרקיה, מקדוניה ופירוט למחנות ההשמדה, ומהווה כתב אישום חמור נגד המלך בוריס השלישי וממשלת בולגריה הפשיסטית. בנוסף לאלה, הוא הוציא עם עמית נוסף 2 כרכים של תעודות ארכיון על יהודי בולגריה במלחמת העולם השנייה בתחום הכלכלי. פרופסור אברמוב מילא בעבר תפקידים בכירים, ממלכתיים וציבוריים ואקדמיים רבים ומגוונים בבולגריה. במרכז למחקר אקדמי בסופיה, המכון לחקר הכלכלה באקדמיה הלאומית הבולגרית, סגן נשיא של הסוכנות לתיאום ולפיתוח כלכלי של ממשלת בולגריה, חבר במועצת הנגידים של הבנק הממלכתי הבולגרי והמרכז לאסטרטגיה ליברלית בסופיה.
רק שנייה, שיקרא אותך גם.
המשתתף השני שלנו ברב שיח הוא ג'קי קומפורטי, במאי, מפיק וצלם דוקומנטרי בתחומים שונים. ב-30 השנים האחרונות עוסק בתיעוד ומחקר איכותי על יהדות בולגריה והשואה. במהלך המחקר והתיעוד פיתח מתודיקה, רעיונות ואיסוף של היסטוריה אוראלית ותיעוד של מקומות וסיטואציות. בעל האוסף הפרטי הגדול ביותר מסוגו של צילומים ומסמכים על השואה בבולגריה. כ-250 רעיונות מצולמים עם ניצולי שואה מבולגריה ואירופה, שערך שמורים במוזיאון השואה בוושינגטון. סרטו על גורל יהודי בולגריה האופטימיסטים זכה לפרסים בינלאומיים יוקרתיים. ב-2021 יצא לאור ספרו המסכם The Stolen Narrative of the Bulgarian Jews and the Holocaust. יחד עם מרתה על הג'ם, כן, ברומפלד. במסגרת הכנס הוא גם יציג סרט חדש, מונומנט לאהבה, שמתעד את מסע הגילוי שלו בעקבות סיפורי אמו על חוויותיה בזמן המלחמה. המשתתפת השלישית בפאנל שלנו, שהיא לא נמצאת כאן, היא פרופסור נאדז'ה רגרו. פרופסור רגרו היא היסטוריונית וחוקרת באוניברסיטה היוקרתית סיינס פה בפריז. היא מלמדת באוניברסיטה היסטוריה תרבותית במשטרים סוציאליסטיים והיסטוריה של השואה בארצות דרום אירופה. המחקרים שלה על השואה עוסקים במדיניות האנטישמית בבולגריה, ביוון ובמקדוניה. המחקרים שלה הם על ההיסטוריה התרבותית, עוסקים בנושאי תרבות שונים בארצות מזרח אירופה תחת המשטר הקומוניסטי. בשנת 2019 היא קיבלה מענק מחקר ל3 שנים כדי לחקור רדיפות ופשעים נגד היהודים בבולגריה בשנות המלחמה. במסגרת תוכנית מחקר בינלאומית רחבה בנושא פשעים במלחמת העולם השנייה שהובאו למשפט. המשתתף הרביעי שלנו בפאנל הוא אנגל צ'ורפצ'ייב. דוקטור אנגל צ'ורפצ'ייב למד באוניברסיטת סופיה, שם סיים תואר ראשון ושני בהיסטוריה כללית, בהמשך סיים את לימודי הדוקטורט שלו באוניברסיטת חיפה. עבודת הגמר שלו התמקדה במערכת החינוך של הקהילה היהודית בבולגריה בין שתי מלחמות העולם. במשך 15 שנה הרצה בתוכנית ללימודי יוון מודרנית באוניברסיטת חיפה, ולימד קורסים שונים על תולדות יוון במאות ה-19 וה-20. משנת 2010 הוא עובד גם באגף הארכיונים של יד ושם. בשנים האחרונות הוא משמש ראש מדור רכש ארכיוני במרכז אירופה וארצות הבלקן ביד ושם. נושא הדיון שלנו היום הוא נושא של ארכיונים. יש לי מושג מה בנושא הזה, שכן הייתי 24 שנים מנהל ארכיון המדינה, וכנראה זאת הסיבה שגם נתנו לי לנהל את הפאנל היום, אבל הייתי גם מעורב עבודה גדולה של הבאת הארכיונים, אוספים ארכיונים על יהודי בולגריה, ממערכת הארכיונית הממשלתית והאזורית בבולגריה. היו לי 4 נסיעות שכל פעם הבאתי אלפי עמודים במיקרופילם, שחלקם הובאו ליד ושם וחלקם לארכיון היהודי, לתולדות העם היהודי בירושלים. הנושא שלנו הוא בעצם נושא שהוא עכשווי ועתידי. כשאנחנו מדברים על המקורות הארכיוניים, הקיימים, הגלויים והנסתרים. אם אני אתרגם לאנגלית את הנושא של ההרצאה שלנו, כי הדיון יהיה גם באנגלית, is what we can find in the archives, unsolved questions about Bulgaria and the Holocaust, and some challenges of the future research. I would like to start. Jackie, you wanted to be the first one, is it? Okay, the floor is yours.
Good morning. I'm a big believer that we should not leave the... Good morning. I'm a big believer that we should not leave history to the historians alone. And the reason is the way how I have conducted my research was as a documentary filmmaker looking to find visual representations of stories of the past. And so I have conducted oral histories, I have visited many different locations, I have looked very closely at archival footage and photographs, and was able to encounter a lot of things you cannot find in the archives. So I'll start with a little story, an example. When I visited in 1990 the site of the former concentration camp in Somovit near the Danube, I had a chance to interview a group of villagers there, and they were telling me a story that didn't sound credible at all. They were talking to me about how the people from the camp were put on a boats in the middle of the river, and those boats were just tied in the middle of the river, not allowed to go anywhere, and then those boats sunk with the people on top. I never heard anything that resembles and didn't find any corroborating information, and it sounded like a very strange story. However, 5 years later, I got to interview Moise Levy, the famous Israeli of Bulgarian descent doctor who made the first heart transplant in Israel, and I think he was the second person to do a heart transplant in the world. And he was an inmate in Somovit as a teenager. And I asked him, I told him about this strange story I heard, and then he said, "Oh, I'm so great." And I asked, "Do you know anything about it?" And he said, "Oh, I'm so great. I'm so happy you asked me about it." And then he tells me a story about how they are in Somovit, and every few days they're allowed to go to do laundry at the river with the guards. And there's these boats that are coming from Western and Central Europe with refugees on top, sometimes 1,000 people on the boat, sometimes 1,500 people on the boat, and they're not being allowed to go past that area in Somovit. That's where they're stopped. And then they stay there for weeks or long weeks, no water, no food, and all day long the people on those boats are crying endlessly. And then they're desperate. At night, people jump into the water in their desperation, and they're being shot at. And this is a spot, for example, where thousands and thousands of people have disappeared with no trace. So I believe, for example, that applying marine archaeology in this area, might be an extremely important way of trying to find out what happened in this region. So there are a lot of things like that that you encounter that I feel should be researched, and I also think that there is really a need for a multidisciplinary response to these questions of research of the future, because there is limits to what we can find in the archives or how much we can interpret the same documents. But there are different type of research of maybe of a more forensic kind of a character or different. And I'd like to suggest a couple of quick topics before we let the other people join. So one of them I think is marine archaeology, which is extremely important. Another subject that is really missing is a research of a military historian who can examine the role of the Bulgarian army during the war in Bulgaria, but also in the annexed territories, and even more important, in the territories of Serbia, where the Bulgarian army was serving as the occupying force for many years and was providing logistic and military and other type of support to horrible things that were happening there. I just need to remind all of us that by December 1941, there was not even one Serbian male alive. They were all killed between the summer and the winter of 1941. At that time, the military control of Serbia was in the hands of the Bulgarian army. There was a general who was, Popov, I believe is his name, who was stationed in Belgrade. What did the people in Bulgaria knew about the final solution in Serbia? There's questions that are not answered. Another subject that I think will be really beneficial is to have a medical anthropology person look into some stories. Many of the oral histories refer to, not many, but a lot of the oral histories. There's always people say, shall we also mention little Simeoncho that died at 3 months old? Or shall we mention this or that? So I think it's extremely important to research child and infant mortality between 1939 and 49, long-term medical effects of labor camp and whatever the events that were in Bulgaria during the war that people went to, and mental long-term effects of oppression and living under these conditions. I also think that there's a lot of oral histories, and I think that these oral histories, if they're not transcribed, they're not accessible, and instead of many different researchers being able to dig and dive into all these content, it's needed to put some effort into transcriptions. That's more or less. I also think another subject that will be good will be a person that researches communications and mass communications. I'm very much interested in understanding how the regime in Bulgaria controlled the media and the public discourse. These are the questions, and these are the provocative questions, but these are things that will be nice to find people research from other disciplines than just history. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Jackie. Well, you spoke only 5 minutes, so give the 10 minutes to somebody else.
Describe the subject matter.
I would like to call Professor Rouman Abromov to speak on the questions. I'm afraid you have to come here. That works? Lovely.
I think it works.
Yeah, good.
Yes.
They fixed it. Okay, fine.
Thank you. I will be as brief as Jackie, probably. First of all, I would like to note that, to remark that it has been a very important progress in the interest in the archives in Bulgaria concerning the Holocaust history and the history of the Bulgarian Jews. During the last 20 or 25.
Go to the microphone. Closer to the microphone. Okay, fine. Yes.
Okay.
Good.
It's better now? No?
I think you're better off from the podium. I'm sorry.
Okay. During the last 20 years or 25 years, there has been a lot of publications of archives concerning the history of the Bulgarian Jews during the war. And several collections have been published starting since the 1995 onwards. And the knowledge on those matters has progressed enormously, I think, in the last 2 decades. I will not not mention the list of the authors, but I would like to share my own experience concerning the publication of the archives on the deportations, a collection which appeared in 2013 and was edited by Professor Nădăjă and myself. Our expectation was that those pieces of documents speak by themselves, and many debates and controversy with were public at that time will be solved or will be settled in some way by reading the extremely evocative documents published. In fact, the result was not so optimistic. It did not collect the official position of the state, which evolved without regard of the evidence collected in those 2 volumes of more than 2,000 pages, including the nominative lists of the deportees. In fact, the problem with the responsibilities of the Bulgarian state was not settled, thanks to this historical and this factual evidence, and the discussions continued, and they are still raging in the Bulgarian academic and political landscape. The optimistic view may be that obviously we are better informed concerning these tragic events of the deportations. If we try to measure quantitatively the effect, we can say that in 10 years, in 2013, the reaction of the public, of the Bulgarian public, to the commemoration of the deportations was much more mild than this year's commemoration, when we had a clear appeal authored by 5 historians, and signed by more than 300 persons, appealing the state to acknowledge its responsibility in the deportations. But anyway, we have to leave our illusions that by just publishing documents, the public will change its mood. Probably the people are happy, are willing happy stories, and this is not a happy story. So the reception of those events is not so obvious. Making a list of possible avenues of research in the archives, because the archives are very rich, but they are not evenly exploited. Many parts of the archives referring to the Bulgarian Jews are not exploited by the historians. They are not quoted by historians, while others are overexploited due to their political relevance. I think that it's time to tame emotions and the political use and misuse of the archives. The obsessive search for saviors and merits would be replaced, in my view, with a turn to the evil actors, also in this drama. The biographies, the intellectual biographies, the personal biographies of those people are not less instructive than the biographies of the savior, of the positive factors in the rescue of the Bulgarian Jews. Historians should turn to this evidence and to this reality. They should turn as well to the everyday anti-Semitism, to the many sides and aspects of everyday anti-Semitism in Bulgaria. For example, the expropriation of the Bulgarian Jews, the micro-history of the expropriation of the Bulgarian Jews, which offers a clear view how those policies corrupted people which otherwise would probably not have acted in such ways. Also, I think a possible avenue of research is the institutional history of the Commissariat for Jewish Affairs. A thorough history, institutional view of this unique institution in the Bulgarian social life and political life, but not only its institutional aspect, but also the human aspects of the Commissariat of Jewish Affairs. Who were the people working there? What were their motivation? What were their self-justification of those people who were dealing with such a somber task in the early 40s. Probably this is a possible topic, a possible avenue of research. Another topic which coincides with what Jackie just mentioned, the communication policies of the Commissariat for Jewish Affairs. What was the public awareness of those policies, the anti-Semitic policies? How the Commissariat communicates its policies, and what was the reception of those policies by the general public and by the concerned sectors in the society? This doesn't mean just the public presence of the Commissariat in newspapers. So, I mean, the many orders and decrees it issued, but also the reception of the public and of the general public about this. As next in the list, in my list, it's the most thorough research of the German archives and the German political and diplomatic archives. Yesterday we had a very interesting lecture by Susanna Kazan, who reported about the work on the 17 volumes prepared in Germany concerning the documents on the Holocaust from the German archives. I think we have a lot of work to be done in concerning the diplomatic relations and the diplomatic steps and decisions in the bilateral relations between Bulgaria and Germany, which are, of course, of great relevance for, in particular, for the deportations of the Jews from the new lands. And finally, final suggestions: the patterns of collective memories and instrumentalization of the history of the Jews during the Holocaust. This is an avenue which Nאדז'ה has recently thoroughly researched, and which produced her brilliant book on the salvation of the Bulgarian Jews, which was published in 2020. So those are just possible avenues of research. Of course, the historian could establish a much longer list on these possible topics. Thank you.
Well, this is a discussion, not lectures. So we should have 2 rounds and maybe more. And in the end, there will be questions from the public. So I would invite Angel Çorapçıyev to be the third one, who will answer for the first question of the unsolved problems, and for the future, which we'll speak later on.
Okay, תודה משה. I will be brief because we're short of time, and I'll try to not to mention again all these research topics that are very important, but Jackie and Roman covered them very much, and I'll try to give more professional perspective on archivist, someone who works for an archive, and we at Yad Vashem collective archive, so we try to find any relevant piece in different archives around the world, not only in Bulgaria, but also in Bulgaria. So try to give you my overview on that. And I should say that the archive is a fascinating place. I personally remember that I happened to know both Rouman and Nאדז'ה from meeting them in the archives in Bulgaria as they research different topics. And I was working for Yad Vashem, looking for different materials that we wanted to acquire. And it's a very nice place both to meet other researchers, and you can always find something new. Although, as we already know, and it was mentioned already yesterday and partly today, there are so many books already with published documents, especially about Bulgaria. So more or less, we can say that we have covered the most important general documents. Probably they have been published even a few times, but there are still many other documents on different smaller topics that still haven't been researched thoroughly. And here, for example, Rouman has really done a lot of work with Nadia Danova years ago on collecting, for example, specifically the materials on the deportation from Thrace and Macedonia and Pirot. In another book of Rouman, he has explored, for example, very much the documentation from the Commissariat of Jewish Affairs on smaller topics, on the expropriation of property of Bulgarian Jews, etc., etc. The most important thing that I think that we have now already a few decades after the archives in Bulgaria were open to public, to the general public and to researchers more widely, is that we have copies of these documents in a few places already. And that's very important, that people, the general public, the researchers, families, can access these documents in different places in the world, not only in the regional archives, although I do miss some time working with paper, the original documents. But today we have digital copies of these documents in Yad Vashem, in Givat Ram, in the archive for the history of Jewish people, in Washington, in the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum, and we work very much with them. So we try really to find everything that is relevant, and Yad Vashem has in the last years, already 10 years, a project that tries to gather everything and copy everything that was thought maybe less important, because these are documentation from the regional archives in Bulgaria, for example, that will not give us the answer who saved Bulgarian Jews, or if the king did this or that. But these are documents very important for what Rouman has dealt with, the micro-history of the Holocaust. And we are trying to get them and to have a copy of them and make them accessible to all the people. And it's very important that we have succeeded to a larger extent in our mission. And nowadays, there are some very important other projects in the world, and one of them, probably most of you even don't know about it, is a project so-called ERI, the European Holocaust Research Infrastructure, that tries to gather and put in one centralized portal the information of all the archives and documentation in the world on different subjects, and gather every archives in the world and put the information, the relevant information about the Holocaust. And it's not only about Bulgaria. So that's why it's very important. People, even without going anywhere, they can open it and see what and where they can find, and where they can find copies. And Yad Vashem is a very important part of this project, and that's why people nowadays can find many, many more times more materials that were accessible 25 years ago, when some of the researches on the Holocaust in Bulgaria, for example, not only, were written. So today, researchers have access to much more from what they need for their research, even from their homes. And thanks to Corona, that was even more accelerated. And I just to give a remark on what yesterday was mentioned by Shlomo Shaltiel on the personal archives of the king, his family, and his chancellery. We don't know. We don't know if this is true, and it can be found really in the former Soviet archives today in Russia. And it's difficult to say, because the work today in Russian archives is very limited, and we still have places. I said already that today, compared to a few decades ago, we have much more access to archives everywhere. But we still have some archives that are closed or partially closed or difficult to get. And here there is another organization, ARIA, that helps us with trying to give more accessibility to different archives and actually helping the work of both researchers but also people like me at Yad Vashem that are trying to get copy of these materials. So we'll try to see, Shlomo, and I'm sure that if not this, but there will be something else that will be very important, very valuable for the Holocaust research in Bulgaria, and maybe some new evidence will be found. And what I just want to mention, the last thing, I'll give Naadesh, of course, because Naadesh has worked really, really extensively in Bulgarian archives and knows very well. And I have to say, I'm very sorry that a speaker that has to be with us today, Ivanka Gizenko from the Central Archives in Bulgaria, is not with us, because she's probably one of the persons that knows most the archives on the Bulgarian case. What I wanted to mention, last thing, is the digital era and the work that institutions like us, Yad Vashem, USHMM, are doing in copying, and we have done most of the work in Bulgaria, luckily, is something that can prevent even attempts in different countries. Like, there are countries in the world still, unfortunately, that might attempt even to hide different archives. And it could be very easily possible 20, 30 years ago, but very hard already today, when we have done a lot of work for copying materials and copies are available and difficult to hide. So, thank you.
Well, we are coming to the last participant, Naadesh Ragaro. Are you hearing me? Oh, very good, very good.
Yes.
So the question, Naadesh, I understand that you were in the archives in Bulgaria and other countries. The question is what we can find now in the archives and which unsolved problems are still, even if you have this material or without having this material. Please.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's a pleasure for me to be with some friends and colleagues whose work has been great, and I'm really thankful for this opportunity for us to have a discussion. I would like first to build on what has been said, second to get back to a few themes very shortly, and third to talk about different perspectives and angles that we might wish to develop. The first one is, Jackie, thank you so much. Yes, indeed, we need to combine different sets of sources and different sets of perspectives. Since the early 1980s, visual Holocaust studies have developed. It was a slow process. Maybe you remember the first publication of the Auschwitz album, which was republished several times, republished in German with a new insight in 2019, translated into French in 2023. We do need pictures, we do need archival films, and there are quite a number of European-funded researches being going on in this field, and you're right, words cannot be sufficient. The second element that you mentioned that was so surprising to me because it's something I did with my book. No, do not leave the production of knowledge to historians alone. Indeed, it came from many fields in society, and in particular, one of the most enriching ways of doing research is forensic research, meaning using the reference to forensic architecture, Weizmann, that was set up as you know, the organization in 2010 to 2011, which has been used for conducting many researches in the field of legality and illegal practices. But as a matter of fact, we do need multidisciplinary research. In my book, I actually managed to progress with the understanding of the very important visual archive from 1943, which shows deportation of Greek Jews transiting through Bulgaria. And in order to be able to do that, I had to go back to architecture, climate, weather change, the help of a geographer, and indeed history cannot be enough. We do also need medical knowledge, you're right, and we do need to be able to have the originality of determining the kind of disciplines that may help us bring together pieces that otherwise we might not know of. Two additional remarks. I agree with Roman that the archives are amazingly rich. Of a long set of diverse archives, it's possible to bring them together and to create a coherent narrative. Nowadays, however, few of those people will have the ability or the willingness to have this broad range and to be able to bring them together, which means that if we want to move forward and to oppose, let's say, the global usage of the past, we need to add at least three things. The first one, we do need testimonies, and Jack has been doing a lot in this respect, but now we've gone to the point where actually we have 5 to 6 generations of testimonies. Some during the war, right after the war, in the 1940s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 90s, 2000s, 2010s. At times we do have people who have been testifying in different environments 3 to 4 to 5 times. So it is high time we have a sociology of the ways in which people speak in different environments and the changes we observe in the ways in which they were related to the past. Not to talk about truth or lies, but to have a better context and to have a richer understanding of that. It's been done for other countries. It seems to me that we still have to do a lot in the context of Bulgaria. Aside from this sociology of testimonies, we may also try to enrich the prosopography of actors. And Roman was moving in this direction when he said, we know a lot about the concerns Jewish affairs, and as a matter of fact, we know little, because we have not examined the prosopography of whose actor went through which trajectories, moved from which institution into which institutions, occupied multiple positions, and therefore
ציבור.
archives. The third one is linked to what Engel said, and I think it's local archives. Most of what we've done has been centered on Sofia Central State Archives, occasionally a few cities, but with little systematic analysis of local dimension of archives. Which takes me to the second point. In terms of themes, I'll be very brief because we could pass it around and we have plenty of directions for research. But the first point I wanted to re-emphasize, the daily life of persecution of Jews is still not very well studied. We have a few moments, dates, laws, we have a few turning points, but what we lack is the ability to see the slow evolution of both policies, responses on the part of the diversity of citizens and the broader community. So daily life of persecution is important. Second, local multiple lives of persecutions. Because we do have people that kept on trying to flee away during the war. So the mother started in Sofia, which were saying that they leave for and a few of those people who have followed those multiple lives, the ways in which they were inserted in society, and how this actually transformed over the course of time.
Thank you.
Regarding theme has to do with the ways in which we might understand the responses of Jews, be they Jews of Bulgarian citizenship, those who were deprived of Bulgarian citizenship in the occupied territories, and refugees. I was very happy yesterday when Canary told us about foreign Jews. It seems to me we have not managed to reconcile the multiplicity of Jewish presences in Bulgaria and in the occupied territories, those who fled from Central Europe, those who fled through Bulgaria from the flavor of our countries, and those who managed to reach Palestine. It's only by bringing back together this diversity of Jewish identities and Jewish paths to escape and Jewish attempt at survival that we shall manage to be able to think about the more global picture.
Nאדז'ה, I would like to stop you because we have another round and we're out of time. If you can, okay, thank you. Sorry. Okay, thank you. Stay with us, we haven't finished yet. I'm calling... our second question is, and the second or the last one, is the challenges of the future research and what we can actually find in the archives for this research. Jackie Conforti, please. You want?
I don't have much to add to what I said.
Professor Abromov, you want to comment? No?
Good to give
Angel
Nאדז'ה
wanted to
my
say
time.
something. Okay. To the microphone.
I think we already spoke on this question as well, so it's better probably to give, if people want to ask us something professionally on the archives.
If you don't have questions,
we cut her off.
Nאדז'ה, do you want to answer to this question of the challenges for the future? Yes, please.
It's not surprising that what we've had up until today is mostly monographies. We have large collections of archives, and we have a few writings with a monographic approach about Bulgaria. And it seems to me that we need to expand in at least two directions. The first one I mentioned, we need to move into local, mobile, connected analysis. The second one is we need to be able to move towards a comparative analysis others in Ukraine archives, I think that we should definitely explore Italian archives, Albanian archives. Simply mention Italian Albanian archives. Complex relation with the Albanians. If we turn the comparative frameworks of the specialized, I find some but this is, I think, a lot that we can cut. We don't do to turn down. People and attention being lost. Multiple changes of population. Only able to form us the special areas that we need to investigate. We need to bring about in order to
Thank you very much. Thank you, Denise. We're out of time, אנחנו קצת בדוחק של טיים, כי התחלנו באיחור של כ-20 דקות, וזה לא רק אשמתנו, אז יש לנו 5 דקות לצאת להפסקה. אם יש שאלות, נענה להם, ואם לא, אז יש לכם כיבוד קל. הארוחה הגדולה יותר, יחסית למה שעכשיו תמצאו, זה יהיה בהפסקה אחרי המושב הבא. אז יש, אם אין שאלות, אז יש? אוקיי. בבקשה. רגע, יש מיקרופון באיזשהו מקום? אורה, איפה היא? אין.
So the question was if we have translations of the... Can you answer in English? Yes. Okay. The question was if we have translation of the documents that we have in the Yad Vashem. Not really. We just don't have the manpower to translate all the documents that we have copy. We do it on a scale of millions of pages every year around the world. And unfortunately, we don't have the resources to do. But we do, in many cases, just give a brief summary of each file that we copy. And usually we copy whole files, not single documents. So it will give the researcher or anyone who will look for information quite a lot of possibility to find something and then can be to go to a specific file or document that can be researched and then translated on a single basis.
יש עוד שאלה אחת שם? רגע, זהו, בבקשה. המון חומרים. הם באופן מיוחד חיפשו חומרים על פרטיזנים, ראיינו פרטיזנים, קיבלו זיכרונות של פרטיזנים, כתבו מחקרים על פרטיזנים. זה מה שעסקו בבולגריה במשך 45 שנה של השלטון הקומוניסטי, בעיקר בפרטיזנים. לזה יש המון חומר, גם שפורסם וגם שנמצא בארכיונים שאפשר לחקור. רבותיי, אנחנו יוצאים להפסקה, זמננו דוחק, ואנחנו יוצאים להפסקה של לא יותר מרבע שעה, כי ההפסקה הגדולה יותר של חצי שעה ומעלה תהיה אחרי המושב הבא. תודה רבה לכם. Thank you very much.
Thank you, נאדז'ה.
ותודה רבה לפאנל שלנו, למשתתפים. תודה לכם. כל טוב.